One of the basic problems in philosophy is that whenever you set out to work out a complex problem, you end up getting so engaged and entangled in these weeds of complexity that you lose sight of the problem that you're trying to solve. Because the difficulty is that it's different to other disciplines. Like, say, if you're trying to solve a very complex maths problem, the precision is maintained because there is a correct answer. Or sometimes, maybe the problem you're trying to solve is misdirected, and you've misunderstood that you actually misunderstood the problem you're trying to solve. It's not possible to solve it. But the layers and layers of abstraction are all aiming towards a pinpoint target, whereas in philosophy, there isn't such a target. You're actually working out what the target is going to be while you're trying to hit the target. So the target is moving, and the way you go about solving the problem causes the target to move in different ways, which means that there really isn't it's not just that you should get outside of the jargon and get outside of the layers of abstraction and complexity, because you can't. Your only tool for approaching the problem is language and words, and those end up becoming complex because the complexity just means that they become unfamiliar. Unless you have the talent to be a poet and you can identify something worth paying attention to and then find the most beautiful words to elicit concepts of it. But most people aren't that. It's very difficult. And part of this, so we're having to face a problem here where we alter the target of our thinking while we think. And we have to discover what it is that we're actually trying to accomplish while we're trying to hit that target. But at the same time, we have to remain humble and recognize that we are still bound by these intellectual tools. So, you might say, I've heard a few people now say that we should just do away with philosophy and reason and focus more on action. And if not action, then poetry and art. And those are the real ways of confronting the real source of of value. Any philosophical problem that's important is really just it's really a musical or artistic or poetic problem that we've shied away from and have turned into an abstract philosophical problem. But I think you have to recognize and be humble and understand that we have this tendency for philosophy and for thinking in abstract terms, and that this is also not something to be denied. So then we go into this other problem, which is really just another side of the same problem, where what happens with the philosophy is, because we have to go into these abstract, treatise-like, complex thoughts in order to broach any given problem, we lose touch with our basic intuition for the problem. And the basic intuition is usually something which is a platitude. I mean, I found in myself that many of the most insightful things I've read in philosophy, if you break them down into their basic elements, they're saying things which are obvious truisms. Some of the things that are the most potent are things just like an idea such as, you never really know if you've fully understood the person you're speaking to. What a platitude, obviously. Obviously you can always, maybe you misunderstood them. But the thing is, it's a platitude that you just can't really appreciate the significance of. And in a large part of the philosophy, what happens is that you're trying to understand the significance of this thing that you've noticed. And you build a big complex theory because that's the only tool you have. And you end up with an all-encompassing view which really brings that piece of information contained in the platitude home so that you can act it out, or so that you can at least hold it in your mind fully. But the issue with that is that because it just takes so many of your intellectual resources, it absorbs so much of your attention to understand the world in terms of this new theory, that you deny all of the other surrounding truisms. So I think maybe you can think of it like all of these self-evident, obvious truisms, which you ignore because you feel that you already know them. Those are kind of like ingredients. No, they're like materials for building a house or for building a cathedral. And people will always choose. What you must do is build a cathedral out of all of the available materials. That's the real challenge. It's not to stop building theories. That's not the problem. The problem is to find a theory that can account for every one of these basic platitudes. And every philosophical theory I've seen so far has found itself upon, a range of these materials, of these platitudes, and has worked out the consequences of them and the interactions between them, but always leaves many aside, so that it denies in principle those self-evident platitude obvious truths, which are knockdown refutations of the philosophy, because the whole point of the process of philosophy is to find some way of reconciling all these different self-evident facts. So I think it's just a different way of seeing, of rating one philosophy versus another, and of seeing the purpose. Because, I think it's pretty clear now that whatever the truth is really not, there's no consensus on how we should describe the truth. But I think we can definitely find ways of seeing the world, or at least philosophical systems, which can account for greater numbers of platitudes. And maybe that's not a knockdown criticism of most truly attentive and purpose-driven philosophers. But certainly for most of the people that I've seen with their worldviews, it seems that they all are denying an obvious principle, or multiple obvious principles, in order to maintain their theory. And I just think it's a good cure-all idea to just be constantly aware that to be aware of the fact that the goal of philosophy is to build a cathedral out of all of the materials and leave nothing aside. If you have that view in mind, then when you see that the system which you have erected and which you believe in, you have a mental cue to recognize that maybe someone else's system has something valuable in it. Because that seems like the problem. In practice, I think that's really the problem, is that you look at your system and you see that it has this enormous explanatory power. And then you see someone else's system and it doesn't explain the things which yours does. But that doesn't mean that their system is wrong. It means that they're attempting to build a cathedral, but they're using a different different set of the same materials as you. But they're using some things which you've ignored, and you've used some things that they've ignored. So it's not, I guess the point here would be that whatever system you can build, which accounts for all of the basic facts, I guess those systems are indistinguishable from each other. They're all equally valuable in a sense. The problem is that no such system has yet been created. All of the systems deny on principle something which is self-evidently obvious. And again, the things which I'm talking about which are self-evident are these platitudinous truths, which everyone understands when they're said in monosyllables. But when they're raised to the level of an abstract theory, they occupy so much of our attention that we're unable to perceive the opposite principle, or another principle which cuts into the domain of this theory. And so I think that's maybe a good way of viewing philosophical systems or even political theories or religious worldviews that you don't ascribe to, is to just recognize that maybe the foundation of their thought includes some things which you already know, but which your system can't account for, so that you should continue to listen to them, unless you already believe truly that you have accounted for all things in life with your system, which would be unspeakably arrogant.